りおしまい。
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Get the Mic, the only show where your host on the left, Owl,
and your host on the right, Brock,
dissect fiction for its mythological significance. On this episode, we're talking about Dragon Ball. Excuse me, as usual, episode 114, which is called Conquest. Karin-sama is worried. But before we get started, if you like what you hear during the show, please give us a like. Subscribe by hitting the red subscribe button below. We upload new episodes on YouTube Mondays and Thursdays and on Rumble Tuesdays and Fridays, so follow us on those platforms if you would please. Also, our Twitter things and Discord things are in the side, but they may need to be updated. Probably. Anyways, I think that's pretty much it before we get started. So this is episode 114 of Dragon Ball, Conquest and Power. So Piccolo stands on the king's hover car and peers down at him. Below on the ground, a troop stops another from firing a rocket launcher towards Piccolo, warning that he would destroy the king as well. Piccolo then casually rips the roof off the car and insults the king for running. The king's guard fires a gun at Piccolo to no effect, provoking him to dangle the guard over the side of the side of the car, we'll say. When the king tells him to stop, Piccolo simply drops the guard to his death below. He then tells the king that he will announce Piccolo as the new ruler of the world. The king naturally refuses, so Piccolo launches a massive energy blast, destroying a large portion of the city. Mostly township, right? It's the town that's all
right.
And then the king agrees to do what Piccolo says for the sake of the planet and his people, as Piccolo threatens to turn everything into a barren wasteland. So there's quite a few things here. Firstly, the idea of collateral damage being something that is both observed and understood by the regular everyday soldier indicate that, and it's set up like this for a reason. They set it up where they're like, don't do that, you'll destroy the king, and then we see Piccolo just totally use collateral damage to his leverage, right?
Exactly.
And so we see that the dignity and decency of regular everyday people is unfathomable, or let's say the indecency of Piccolo is unfathomable by regular everyday people who are somewhat represented by the soldiers.
Yeah, I think not only is that uh, shown here as sort of a dichotomy between Piccolo and the king and their modes of being. But there's also that aspect of what we saw with the Red Ribbon Army and the rocket and the destruction. And there's this understanding that to destroy Piccolo or to attempt to destroy Piccolo with those means in this instance would actually destroy the king himself. Meaning that this is a physical destruction that would destroy the physical instantiation of their king who has been able to create peace on earth, and the spirit of Piccolo would live on in his stead by simply just trying to attack in this way. And Piccolo has strategically made it this way, right? That's why he's doing what he's doing.
Yeah, that's why he targeted King Furry to begin with. He didn't even go for West City. He didn't go for the most populous place. He went for the spiritual capital of the world.
Yes, the symbol.
And so, he also, King Piccolo, makes fun of Furry for running away. He's like, why are you trying to run away from me? You couldn't deal with me yourself, whatever, right? And that is a call for a righteous spirit to take unholy action. That is basically the Emperor telling Luke to strike him down with all the anger he has, right?
Right.
Become me. Why wouldn't you become me?
Right. He's saying my worldview is that might makes right, and so you have to engage me on the level of might. And he's saying, why won't you do it? Because you know that you have to in order to defeat me.
And the fact that he doesn't actually gives Furry some leeway here. Let's say not some advantage, but we'll see in the coming episodes how his refusal and his only reluctant acceptance goes, and how far that
Right. It's a self-sacrificing sort of thing that the king is doing here because he he has to give up his identity as the benevolent king
Mhm.
insofar as people see him in order to stop total destruction, which means that the idea of what a king can be in people's minds is now being subverted by
Well,
Piccolo's action.
let's say this: what's better, having a tyrant king or having anarchy?
Exactly.
And so,
So he agrees to be a reluctant participant in this sort of
ordered malice.
yeah, in this orchestra that Piccolo's directing here because it's ultimately a game.
Mm-hmm. And so, um, yeah, that pretty much covers it for that part. And so back with the Go crew, they retrieve the two cryopods from capsules. Sorry, I couldn't say that. And place Roshi and Chaozu's bodies into them. Yamcha rushes to their plane's radio and calls out to Ten Shinhan, begging Tien to let him come along and train using the Mafaba as well. Bulma tells Tien that if they collect the Dragon Balls, they can bring the two back to life. Tien then reveals that Piccolo had destroyed Shenron after making his wish. Refusing Yamcha's continued pleading to help, he switches off the radio and flies off into the distance. Bulma asks Puar if she thinks that Goku's still alive, and Puar says she does. Oolong doubts this and fires a gun at him, asking if he really wants Goku dead that much. And so there's a couple things here. First, we finally have the rest of the cast learn of not only Roshi and Chaozu's death, but of Shenron himself. And that's significant.
Right. It's a cosmic event that's happened, right, in the death of Shinron. And so it really has shattered their illusion of safety here in the world. It's sort of like the walls around their paradise have been toppled down. And so anything goes. So breaking that news to them is extremely shocking. And it's telling that in response to this, the first thing that Yamcha does is he rushes to try to join Tien and take on that responsibility, even if he isn't physically able, right?
Yeah.
And you know, it speaks to what we were saying in the last episode about how Tien has literally deprived Yamcha of this. it's Tien's fault that Yamcha can't. And so there's sort of a reflection in what Tien is doing here and trying to make it about something that he can take
Well,
on
it's
to
making about
himself.
him,
Yeah,
right? Because look at it this way: if Tien was to adopt a more holy path at this instance, he would realize that part of his atonement would be Yamcha.
exactly.
But he really what he wants to do is sacrifice himself. He wants to become Roshi. That's why I was saying that when he's staring down at them, it's like his ideal is destroyed and his innocence is destroyed. So what he's gonna do is he's gonna try and embody Roshi and do the exact same thing he did when that's not necessarily necessary, especially with Yamcha being here and able to help.
Yeah, he's pitted himself up against Piccolo in the sense that he thinks that Piccolo is sort of his equal but opposite, and that with his mode of being, he can cancel Piccolo's mode of being. That he can train himself to be so good that he can seal away what Piccolo is from the world again.
Not realizing that to do that, he would have to first achieve the status of spiritual father.
Which he has not, because he has not gone through the training that Roshi has for him.
He cannot banish the moon from the world, and being Goku's link to his shadow beast and all that. He wouldn't be able to do
Whereas,
that, where Roshi can.
also, Piccolo can do a similar thing in destroying Shenron, right?
Yes.
And so there's this level of cosmic power that we've seen that Tien cannot affect necessarily.
Not as of yet. Although we do see him do kind of a mini cosmic event
when he uses the Tri-Beam to destroy the ring.
Yes.
But that's sort of an earthly representation of the spiritual thing that Roshi had done before. And so we see that Tien's at the top of the physical hierarchy, but not the top of the spiritual hierarchy.
Right. And so, that is all Shenron being destroyed, and we see the Yamcha pleads for him to help. Now, the last thing here, Oolong doubting that Goku's still alive. I think it's almost the realist in Oolong, and the fact that he needs to ground Bulma is that idea, because Bulma, think about what she does. She goes to Puar knowing what Puar will tell her is what she wants to hear.
Right.
I mean, she didn't go to Launch. She wasn't like Launch, because Launch would probably be like, probably not.
Right. But there's, with Puar being this sort of anima type projection out there, it is the sort of thing that we'll see potential, right? We'll see
exactly.
That out in the chaos there is the potential of the hero to be called forth again. And so she reaches out to the unconscious, let's say, by speaking to Puar and says, "Hey, unconscious, is there a chance that Goku still, the spirit of the hero, still lives now that we know that Shinron is gone?" And Puar says, "Yes, in chaos, right?
And
The spirit of the hero
let's say,
potentially is still there.
Potentially, yes.
And yet there is the dissociated spirit in her head that is Oolong, that is sort of her own spiritual
and
weakness."
he has to speak up when that happens, right?
Yeah.
Because she can't live in a fantasy. She can't do what Yamcha has done for whenever he was the desert bandit, and live in a way that's unholy but think that it's fine.
Right. And then we see, of course, that this is the opposite of how Yamcha really acts, because Yamcha is noble in response to this information, whereas what Bulma doesn't understand is manifest there in Oolong, in that there is a defeatist attitude, that it's probably knowing that Shinron could be defeated. The spirit of the hero has no place in this world anymore. That's what she...
And the seeking of wisdom itself is not a goal that can
redeem,
be rewarding.
Yeah.
Striving itself has almost been eradicated, right?
Yeah, to say that the redemptive process is no longer part of the gathering of wisdom, and so now it's, it is her weakness that says that to her, though, and that's what Oolong always has sort of represented, is that dissociated spiritual weakness and her unintegrated sort of masculine voice.
Yeah, her ineffectual masculine, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where we leave off there, although I think there is one thing you didn't include that I'm going to mention. Yeah. about Oolong, them mistaking Oolong for being Roshi in the chair?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit later, but I think this is a good time to talk about it because it's
Yes,
all
because
part of this
we're
sort of
talking. I
same
mean, we're
bottle.
just
Yeah.
talking about Oolong, so I wanted to
Yeah.
mention that. So, Bulma mistakes Oolong for Roshi when they get back to the island, and they run out. She runs out there, and they all are like, "Roshi, you're back," whatever, and then it's just Oolong. And the reason that that's significant is because it's actually not Oolong's fault. It's that she is mistaking any masculine force for what she wants to be there, meaning that any masculine spirit could potentially become Roshi, and she's seeing the potential in all of them simultaneously, to where she can see that the potential of Roshi in anyone,
Right.
and it being Oolong.
Right, because that is a spiritual weakness that she saw in Roshi and recognizes that even though he had those weaknesses that she can see in Oolong,
Mm-hmm.
he could still have those weaknesses and be the Roshi. And so that's sort
Yes.
of um, the tendency to see him when he's not there or see him potentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, it happens again whenever Launch opens the door and calls out to them as Blue Launch that lunch is ready. They think for a second that it could be Roshi, right?
Yes, and Blue Launch sets a plate for him,
Right.
which makes even that one makes even more sense
That one's
because
kind of obvious, right?
she hasn't been conscious. She's been around. She hasn't been conscious as Blue Launch during this whole part because we've had it's been blonde since Tambourine.
Right.
Yeah,
But Blue Launch is blind to the spiritual weakness in Roshi and always sets a place at the table for him, even when he's absent, right? And so there's
but in that significant, yeah. Go ahead.
it. It's to highlight the absence and to say that it's a space that needs to be filled, not necessarily that it's can never be filled, right?
It's almost um, Mother Nature calling forth that spirit to come sit at the table and be nourished.
Right. It makes a space for the spiritual
Yeah,
father in the
exactly.
archetypal home, let's say.
Mm-hmm. And so that really ends off that, which, yeah, we spent a good 10 minutes on that one.
Yeah, but I think that it's a nice little, we have these every now and then. It doesn't necessarily further what's going on in the story, but it does highlight
I mean, there's
the
personal character
situation
drama,
for the
right?
personal,
Mm-hmm.
well, for people's. It is good for us to see that process where everyone is coping with the absence of a spiritual father in their normal life, right?
Yes, and that it's actually, and this is kind of what I was talking about on Twitter. Is it's an analog for the self, in which this happens to people all the time when someone close to them passes away. They think they see them, they're reminded by them all the time, things like that. And it's going to be super important for the rest of the arc, or what we're going to get to
Yeah.
very soon. And so let's go ahead and go back to Yajirobe approaching the top of the tower with Goku on his back. He thinks the structure looks something like food, like a chicken or
I think he
a
sees like a
feast,
tomato.
a tomato.
Oh
And
no,
then
I think he saw a pizza maybe.
there we
He sees a
go.
round food. I don't remember which one it is.
He begins to fall backwards, but quickly catches himself, waking Goku up, and he finally reaches the top, collapsing in exhaustion. Korin approaches, complimenting Yajirobe for his achievement. He then stops Goku from asking a question, telling him that he already knows that Piccolo beat him to a pulp by watching with his water pots. He actually says he gets bored up there. He has to
Yeah.
look what's down below, and then Yajirobe looks over the side, like trying to see if he can see
Trying
what's
to
down
physically
below.
see.
Right, trying to physically see, which is great because it is what Yajirobe would do, which is physical sustenance, no spiritual sustenance, physical interpretation. Right,
Right.
no,
And the water being the unconscious and what you can see there.
and we'll get into
Yeah.
Yajirobe's interaction with that in just one more episode, I guess. And so Yajirobe gazes into one of the pots and sees Piccolo coercing King Furry to act against his principles, which is exactly what Piccolo would do. Goku asks Korin to train him again, and Korin tosses him a senzu bean from a large pot, saying that there's nothing more that he can teach Goku. Seeing that the wizard food is just a bean, Yajirobe calls Korin a bastard and begins shoveling beans into his mouth. After a moment, he drops the pot, falling to the floor and inflating. When Goku eats his bean, his wounds are completely healed. Yeah, Yajirobe's like busting out at the seams. I will say, I do like the dub of this scene. It really gets across the selfishness of Yajirobe, because he says, like, they're beans. Well, if they're just beans, I'm gonna get my fill, and he like just starts shoveling it into his mouth. Right.
I like that. I'm gonna get my fill. Right.
That's it. Because in this, he just calls Korin a bastard,
Right.
which is like, that's not as. It doesn't get across the spirit of the thing as well as I'm gonna get my fill. Because that, like, I'm gonna get my fill, that is almost Yajirobe's essence, like, distilled.
And it's great because what Goku says to Yajirobe when he eats his bean is he tells him one of these can keep you sustained for 10 days. He eats his bean and then he's perfectly healed.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the thing that Yajirobe does not understand, and he needs to physically learn it to comprehend it rather than understand it hypothetically, because he would never believe, as we talked about whenever Goku first made this trip, and he also did not believe that a single Senzu bean could sustain you on the hermetic path.
Exactly.
And so we talked a lot. We won't rehash everything that the Senzu bean means, but essentially that concept of going on the hermetic path, learning how little you really need to survive, and minimizing yourself down to a single point, and becoming hermetic in that sense that you're almost Spartan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we know that Yajirobe is that way, and he's a wandering samurai, right?
Yeah, but he's not
but he's not it spiritually. He only
Right.
is that way physically. So he is, and that's why he's able to climb the tower
But
the way that he does.
I would say he indulges, though. He's very much a spirit of indulgence.
Right.
And the issue here,
and that indulgence is symbolic, right? In the same way that Goku's eating is symbolic, we talked a little bit about how Goku, without a path, without having a spiritual journey to be on, would be constantly chasing after that sustenance. And I think that's what Yajirobe does, is he fills himself up physically because he's not spiritually finding the sustenance.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's what we've kind of established with Yajirobe's character the past 10 episodes or so. But what I was gonna say is it's the discipline. It's the idea that discipline is freedom, right? The idea that someone, and that narrowing one's self down to one's needs alone is a nourishing experience. It seems paradoxical, just like the Jocko Willink discipline is freedom, right?
Well, it's that rule in nature that protects forests whenever underbrush burns. It's that idea that there is a necessary burning off that needs to be done, and Yajirobe is fat for a reason, right?
Because he's physically gluttonous.
He's literally gluttonous, and he is unwilling to sort of to sacrifice what's not needed, right?
Right.
It's kind of the irony in him being a fat samurai, is that he acts it out, but he also indulges himself, so he's not able to be the best version of the samurai that he could be, right? It's his weakness that we see, is his physicality and being
it translates
rooted
to
the earth
his cowardliness, as we've talked about briefly, but
self-preservation.
We'll continue to get into. Yeah, it has to do with that Spartan self-preservation. But that's really the sensu bean in this, and so the last thing we see is Tien meditates in the woods, training his mind for the Mafuba. An owl with glasses watches overhead as visions of Roshi's and Chaozu's death flash in Tenshinhan's mind. He uses his energy to control the fire, creating a pillar. Back at Korin's tower, Korin tells Goku that he cannot train him, as Goku has now surpassed him in strength. He then tells Goku that Piccolo even killed Roshi. In shock, Goku flashes back to his time with Roshi, recalling his training and Roshi's strength of spirit. Goku then rushes to the edge of the tower, preparing to avenge his master. Korin warns him that if he goes, he will surely die this time. But what he doesn't do is he doesn't say, "Don't go, that's an order."
Exactly. And that's something that Roshi had done.
Goku isn't persuaded, so Korin tells him that if he's up to it, he can try drinking the super sacred water.
Or was it the Ultra Divine?
Shojinsui.
Mm-hmm.
Or Ultra Divine water. Shojinsui is actually not that hard. It sounded weird.
It's the super god water, right?
Yeah. That's the kanji translation, I believe.
Which, I do like that kanji translation, because if you think of the term super meaning more like superordinate, it's the superordinate god water, which is to say that this is the superordinate version of the god that you subordinate yourself to.
Well, let me ask you
water,
this.
wisdom.
Let me ask you this, Brock. From what tree does Eve derive her fruit?
The tree of knowledge of good and evil.
It's God's tree, correct?
Right.
God's fruit that they're not supposed to eat. Everything else is theirs, but that's God's.
Right.
So, just wanted to mention that. Super God water.
Well, there's not just one tree in the garden, right? So, I do like that idea, because the story has begun with the eating of an apple, right? That symbolic knowledge of good and evil that was there right from the very beginning of the story, with Goku meeting Bulma, becoming accompanied with the idea of malice, and the slow process that he's had to go through all this time of taking on the responsibility of having gotten that knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, I do like that you bring that up, because there's also the tree of eternal life, right? Or you could just call it the tree of life. So I like the idea of that, because we're now leaning towards, it's almost like there's a false water, just a physical water. There's the physical lesson that Goku learned whenever he came here. And now there's a different water. That's the real thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's the spiritual version of that water.
Right.
And so it's you have,
and we already saw too, because you had too, the way that Goku defeats Tao is by using the physical instantiation of the spiritual water, and Tao is a physical instantiation of the spirit of malice.
Right, by being an assassin.
Now we've moved up with Piccolo being the spiritual instantiation of that. And Goku having to
and he's an assassin of ideas, you could say. Like, he demoralizes completely and destroys concepts. And so he's a higher order version of that, right, in the same sense. And yeah, I love that Tao is sort of the nice end to that story of resolving the problem of the knowledge of good and evil, in a sense, right? Because it allows Goku to graduate to this next spiritual journey.
Well, that is it, right? That the knowledge of the answer to it is by doing the best thing you can, which is staring down at your grandfather's ball, which tells you to redeem the spirit of the father. Excellent revision though of Tao's little plot, because that is very important to this.
So yeah, this is the next step, and the super divine water is not an arbitrary like MacGuffin.
No, it isn't, and people think it is.
They think that it's just like, oh, we're just doing the same thing over again.
And now Goku's more powerful. It's like, we'll go through. And if you're interested in that, we will definitely be going through the Chojinsui like as we get through.
Yeah, this is just like a sneak peek of what it's about, because we're going to spend a lot of time talking about it.
I do also want to say, actually, we did that in reverse order. So let's go back.
Yeah.
To Ten Shinhan.
Meditating with the fire.
Yes. So here, it's almost like he's trying to physically enlighten himself to be more enlightened, to use the Mafaba, being driven by, like I said earlier, the death of his ideal and the death of his innocence, as almost fuel for his
yeah, I was going to say, it's almost like he wants to become the fire, like become enlightening.
There's also a hellish aspect to it, I have to say, because like we've said,
it's for his reason is ultimately for vengeance against Piccolo for what he's done. I don't think it's for as noble of a reason as he would want people to think.
And we saw, right, what happened here with Goku about to be on that same vengeful path. The first time he was on the vengeful path, he got almost killed twice. And so now,
And this is sort of one of those, like, if you try for a third time to act out a vengeance, you will die.
well, yeah, we'll get to that. But what I was saying is, like,
Yeah.
we've seen that vengeful path and how it was even hellish for Goku. I mean, think about how the lighting is when Goku goes to fight Tambourine. It's all like red, dusk colors, right? And it's all very vengeful, and its color scheme and the way that it goes about it. Goku's bushy tail, we covered all that. And so here, like I was trying to indicate in the symbolism between each, it really shows Tien's vengeful path and how he is a fire right now that can only destroy.
And he even says it to himself, I won't be able to do the Mafubo in this state. Thinking about that motivation.
Yes.
And I think
it's
it's
true.
because he
He
just
can't.
doesn't understand it. He can't possibly comprehend.
Well, was Roshi doing it for revenge? Did Roshi dig up the thing so he could do it for revenge? No. Roshi was doing it out of a more pure intention spirit, and that's the whole point.
Of course, he had to explicate that it wasn't entirely pure, right?
Yeah.
Whenever he came up against him, which is his downfall, right? He says, "I'm doing it for my blindness, ultimately."
Yes.
But yeah, that's the thing that Tien doesn't understand, that he couldn't possibly understand, and also the thing that makes it so that Bulma and crew could mistake Oolong for
But
Roshi, right?
perhaps something that could have been alleviated by the presence of Yamcha. Because
Who has begun to undergo Roshi's training.
in fact, he's even in the orange. He's been wearing orange this whole time, right? He's been following that path.
Right.
And additionally, if this the proper way, and think about just let's take the physical manifestation. What is more of an embodiment of Roshi? To go off and train by oneself to try to improve on no, to train by oneself for vengeance, or would it be to go off and teach someone something? He could be teaching Yamcha right now, being more spiritually aligned with Roshi than anything that he's doing alone.
Right. And I think that is necessary for what it means to use the Mafuba to seal away Demon King Piccolo, which is that it's almost like teaching the world what needs to be sealed away so that peace can
Exactly.
can
Right.
prosper.
And that's what we said. And that's the martyrdom
but
of
if
it.
if Tien's just going to be a martyr, I don't know if that necessarily creates that world, or if it just creates a vacuum.
No, it just furthers the vacuum of value, and it actually, the fact that his attempt failed would probably fuel more on to Piccolo, but we'll get into that.
Yeah.
So wanted to mention that about Ten Shinhan. Last thing here, the flashback of Goku and his ultimate choice to not take the vengeful path a third time. So he thinks back about Roshi, and there's some shots in here that even you said, Brock, weren't in the original cut, which is true. But he thinks back to his training, his experiences with Roshi even before his training, the first Kamehameha wave, the giving of the Kintoon, all that stuff. This is significant because it shows the impact that Roshi has had on Goku's path and how Goku has been able to stay on the path because of Roshi. And further, how Roshi has cleared the way for his students' potential to be fully realized, such that Goku can understand and appreciate that now at his level of maturity more so than, let's say, Yamcha, because I mean, Yamcha gets mad and he tries to go help, and he like calls Tien for help, but it's more of an understanding that Goku has, and I think that's why he doesn't do it. He doesn't go this time.
Yeah, I think it's to show that also those fundamentals
is.
that allow Goku to have this epiphany about what needs to be done next, symbolically shown by the offering of the super divine water, is something that Tien lacks because he doesn't have those fundamentals. He has not been gifted the Kinto Un. He has not acted out the skipping. He hasn't served the community. He hasn't done all the things that Goku did so that he would actually appreciate what's happening in the world.
So you'll like this. Again, another analog here of physical and spiritual manifestations. How does Goku derive his path with Tao? He stares into the physical manifestation of his grandfather's spirit. How does he find his path now? He gazes into the spirit of Roshi.
Yeah. It is also a foreshadowing of what he's going to do to ultimately find the Ultra Divine Water, is that he looks inward to his internal spiritual father, right?
Which is, all of this is to say that there is an internal character arc going on and a struggle going on, and this is not a MacGuffin. It's not like a side quest, even though the next episode does get a little video gamey.
Oh, it's so good. It is such a good episode.
It is really good, though. Anything you want to add to close out?
No, I don't want to give too much of it away.
I think we got 35 minutes on this one, so we'll have some more long ones too.
Yeah, we'll have a lot more to say about the Ultra Divine Water very, very soon.
Yes. So if you enjoyed the episode, please give us a like. Subscribe to our channel. We upload new episodes Mondays and Thursdays to YouTube, Tuesdays and Fridays to Rumble. Check us out on those platforms, please. I'm your host on the left, Owl.
I'm your host on the right, Brock.
We hope you guys enjoyed the show. Have a good night.